podcast.
Hello, Sid. It's great to be here with you.
It's so exciting. How are you?
I am well. Just settling into the new role and enjoying just having a few more employees back on campus, but really missing the students, obviously, and then the full staff.
For sure. So if you just want to start by introducing yourself, I'm sure most of the people probably know a little bit about who you are, but if you just want to give people more details about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I've been at Greenville University for 7 years, worked closely with President Philby during that time, and most recently served in the role of Executive Vice President. So a lot of students didn't actually maybe see what I was doing behind the scenes a little bit with the admissions and finance and international affairs, athletics, a lot of the operational side of the campus. But before that, I was in the classroom, some in the School of Business, taught business law and other management courses, so I've gotten to meet some of the students. So that's kind of what I've been up to, at least in the last 7 years here on campus.
Yeah, and what about your family? Tell us about your family.
Yeah, so I have a wonderful husband that makes things possible for me. His name is Phil. Maybe some of the students know him from the volleyball court. He's kind of the loud, encouraging support staff for the women's volleyball team. He also coached men's volleyball here for a little while. And then my 2 daughters, Brittany and Tiffany, were on campus. Brittany just graduated last year in social work, and Tiffany was here for a few years, but has most recently been raising her son, my grandson, Corbin.
That's awesome. Yeah. Do you know your Enneagram type, or do you want to talk about your strengths from the Strengths Finder?
Yeah. So my strengths are kind of interesting, especially for a female, I find. I am first and foremost analytical and an achiever, then command and focus, and then finally learner, my top 5 strengths. So very driven, very results oriented, but also just constantly thinking about how things could be different, analyzing different data points and things like that. So, and then learning, obviously, at a rapid pace, always interested in new things. That's my strengths finder. My Enneagram, I'm an 8. I definitely think it describes something about the way I relate to others. It's really fun with our family to think about the different types. My husband's a peacemaker. My one daughter is a 6 and the other is a 7. So just the dynamics are really interesting to think through how that all works. I have, my wing is a 7, so I'm kind of an adventurous, adrenaline junkie as well.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it is an interesting test. I don't know.
Yeah.
It says something about us, I think.
I like it because when I know my type and I know other people's types, it helps me get to know them better, but I know it's a test that doesn't put everyone in boxes.
Right.
It helps me better work with them. So yeah,
I agree.
Enneagram's my favorite. I really like it. So
I do too. I agree because it's the relational part that makes it fun. So I can totally see why my daughters butted heads so much with the 6 and the 7, and then I was the 8, and the way that dynamic plays out in the family is just. And my husband being a peacemaker, it makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. So can you talk a little bit about, so you went to GC at the time as a student. Can you talk about kind of where you're from and how your decision-making process to come here was, why you chose to come here for your college?
Yeah, so I actually came here for all the wrong reasons. I had a Division I track scholarship fall through at the last minute. Actually, the coach there had backed off a scholarship because he thought I would end up having some injuries, which I did in fact have some injuries, so it was a little prophetic. But at the 11th hour in May, I was trying to decide what to do, and my parents, who were strong Christians. I wasn't at the time. I was pretty rebellious and was doing a lot of other things. Said that they would only pay for a Christian college, and I was smart enough to know I didn't want to go into a lot of debt. So I had looked at some other schools to run track and play volleyball at that were private schools, but they weren't Christian schools. And Brian Patton had been calling me incessantly, like since I was a junior, and I just decided to give it a shot and came here. Didn't think that my life would be changed at all. I was very resolute in at the time we had Bible and culture as freshmen, that if there was a God, it couldn't be a good God because of all of the struggles that my family was dealing with. Both my brothers had severe genetic disorders and disabled. My dad was dying of cancer, had only a few months to live. So I just didn't see how there could be a good God. And I was struggling with all of that and filling my life with all the wrong things to try to run from that. And so little did I know my whole life would be changed here. It wasn't right away. But by the time I was a sophomore or junior, one of my brothers had died, and I really had to deal with that. And yeah, it was transformative. And so things started to change my sophomore, junior year. There's still faculty on campus, though, that think, how could I possibly have come back to Greenville to be in an administrative role when they knew me as a freshman or a sophomore? It didn't look like I was going to be a great fit, let's say, for Greenville University in the future.
That's crazy. Well, thank you for sharing your story. That's really awesome and inspiring. So, you touched a little bit on your experience as a student, but I always like to hear, because I know campus now, but I have no idea what it was like back then other than what people tell me. So what was your experience like as a student, and kind of what did you study, and include all of those details?
So I was a philosophy major and political science, and so I had, key professors that some of you even probably know today, like Rick McPeak, is still around. I don't think you know Craig Boyd, but they were on the philosophy religion side. And then I had Richard Houston for some of my history political science classes. So some of the greats, are still around. And so I don't think it was it was different. Obviously, the 90s were different. Looking back, you can tell it. It's been a long time. But really, the experience that I hear students describe is similar in a way, because there's just really great relationships with each other and with faculty members and coaches. Coaches play a key role. Obviously, Brian Patton's still here. There's been a lot of different volleyball coaches, but actually my senior year, Tom Ackerman had just graduated and was a coach, one of the coaches my senior year. So in a way, a lot hasn't changed. Yeah. There's some similarities to how it was on campus.
Yeah, that's cool. The relationships we talk about now a lot, it's cool to hear that that's not something that's just happening right now. Like, that's a lasting thing that this institution has been able to do. So that's really cool to hear.
So.
Can you talk about your journey after GU educationally and your master's or doctorate program? Like, what was your educational journey after you graduated?
So I went from here to the University of Illinois. I actually had planned to go to the University of Michigan, but then that was actually when my dad had really bad cancer, and so I stayed closer to home. And so went to my law degree first, actually, and finished that. So that Juris Doctorate 3 years after I graduated. And practiced law for a few years, really enjoyed it, had lots of opportunities to do some things there, but really felt called to both adoption and to just doing more with young adults, because I recognized how much my life had been shaped here at Greenville, but just generally during that early 20s time frame. And so decided to teach at Eastern as like a part-time role at Eastern Illinois University. And then they asked if I'd do a full-time role, and I hadn't really planned on going on into education. But because of that move, I did get my MBA, my Master's in Business Administration, because the position was in the business school, and so the JD MBA is the combination that was needed to be academically qualified at Eastern Illinois University to teach in that role.
Sweet, that's awesome. So you talked about that was kind of your first job, practicing law out of college. How did you go from that to where you are now?
Gosh, it doesn't really make sense unless you believe in just God's calling and leading you into the next step, because each step wasn't planned. I really planned on practicing law and then becoming a judge in the circuit. Well, interestingly, my mentoring attorney became the judge, so he was at the law firm. He became the judge, so then I had a conflict of interest that I couldn't become a judge there for a period of time, and even, it was interesting that at that same time was when the Eastern Illinois University job came up, and I really felt called to adoption. So, really felt like that was a good step for me, because the practice of law is all day, every day, billable hours. I wouldn't have been able to go down the path of adoption responsibly without changing a little bit of my lifestyle. And so got into teaching there, and then planned on again going back to be judge. Well, was working with my husband in youth ministry. We came to the Agape Festival that Greenville was still having with our youth group, and Richard Houston happened to be there randomly and asked if I'd ever be interested in coming back to my alma mater to teach. And I was like, well, actually, I'm going to get out of teaching. I'm going to do what I thought I wanted to do, which was become a judge. And I had the opportunity to, because that conflict of interest time had passed with my mentoring attorney.
Okay.
So anyway, long story short, I go to this attorney who was going to appoint me to be judge and say, I got this random request to go back to my alma mater and teach, and I'm just trying to decide what to do. And he said, Suzanne, there's a lot of things you can do in the court system to be, salt and light and really, impact people, but you'll impact way more people by transforming young lives and helping mentor during that process. So I kind of followed the path and took the teaching job here, but always knew that there was also a call to the administrative piece, because I also had a role as the chief legal officer when I started as well. So I was involved in the administration from the start as well.
Wow, that's so cool. I love hearing people's stories, like coming from like what you major in all the way to like where you are now, because they say it doesn't matter what you major in, like all of that, like in the college decision process you think I'm gonna pick this and this is what I'm stuck with forever. So I love hearing how plans change and you have to adapt. And you've done a wonderful job, so your story's really cool.
Thanks. It's a journey. It's not like just a straight path. I always tell even my daughters, you just kind of see how things unfold, and you got to be open to where the Lord leads.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've already brought up your walk in your spiritual life. So I know it's important to you because you brought it up without even me asking. But how does that play out in your life, and then also just for this institution in general? What does faith mean to GU?
It means so much. I don't think we would do what we do, or even the students engage like they do, without just the presence of God in this place, and permeates, even into the classroom, onto the athletic courts and fields, and all of that. For sure, like I said, wouldn't have necessarily come back without the call of the Lord on my life to impact others. So I just think when we say we're transforming lives for character and service and empowering students for that, it's because of our Christ-centered Wesleyan background that we uniquely do that and put others before ourselves, think about how we can serve. Don't look at the world the way that a lot of people might, that you've just got to get a career, to get a job and get paid and survive. We actually challenge our students to think bigger than that and thrive. And the reason they thrive is because they are living holistically with the power of God, in them and through them be used. And so, yeah, it's a different mindset. It's a deeper meaning. That's what happened for me as a student, is I found just a deeper meaning for life. And even amidst some of the death that I was experiencing in the fear, there was just a deep rooted sense of purpose and all of that nothing else could really explain.
Wow, that's really cool. You want to talk a little bit about, just because I know some students looking at Greenville, a lot of them are already Christians, but some of them aren't. And so, I don't know, as someone who wasn't and then coming in and having this transformational story, what would you say to those students who are believers coming in and who aren't? Like, I think Greenville has a lot to offer no matter what. And in my experience, I know I came in as a Christian, but a lot of my friends didn't. And it's not this place where we take Bibles and stuff them over. That doesn't happen at all. It's very graceful, and it's just open. It's just an open, welcoming place. And so, I don't know. What's your perspective on that?
I just think that this is a place where we're not afraid to ask the tough questions and let students grapple with why they exist, who they are, what do they think life's about, what do they hope is said about them when they die. I mean, I know that sounds like it's deep, but I just think we don't dodge those questions. And so that's why it works for people who are Christians or who aren't Christians, because we're not saying you have to believe this way. We're just saying, what do you believe about life in a bigger picture? And I think even as we, sit here in the week of COVID, it's causing people yet again. I mean, this is something we know will happen over and over and over again in culture, is eventually people have to think about what matters and why they do what they do and who they engage and what seems to bring meaning in life and what doesn't. And I think that that's the unique approach that we take at GU, that doesn't just set out like you have to believe this or that to come here, but we are going to say, we're going to challenge you to think about it in every class, in everything we do. So you don't have to believe it, but you do have to think on a deeper level.
I've never heard it described that way, so that's really cool. I like that. Transitioning a little bit and back to kind of what you do, like I'm sitting here in the midst of President Davis now. You want to talk about just your transition into presidency?
Yeah, it's really not like that. That's what's funny. It's like I'm not a very formal person. You also sit here and you look around my office. I have lots of horses. So I'm still the random girl who rides at the end of the parade on a horse, in homecoming. Like, and nobody, who is that on a horse? Like, or all college hikes. So I don't see my role as president as I don't know, a lot of pomp and circumstance. I mean, we do that because it is important to celebrate things and to recognize people's achievements. But really, what I hope that I bring to the role is just a very collaborative environment, both at the faculty and staff level, but also with the students feeling comfortable to engage and speak into things. And, we exist because of you guys. Like, that's why we all want to be here. And so to just bring a very student-centric model to the presidency is what I hope to accomplish.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love to hear that. I absolutely love that. So that's great. Do you have any specific, like, what the next 2 years, what do they look like while you're president? And then just talk about, like, in the future, maybe 10 years down the road, where do you see GU going?
Wow, it's such a different environment now. I think the good news is everyone kind of knows it now, where we are doing things that will bring value to students. So in the next 2 years, I think bringing a rebirth of what that means and how do we create a place where not only students are well cared for while they're here, but also that they're connected to the next phase of life and don't feel just dropped after they graduate, that they feel that they are very prepared to provide whatever service they're called to, that they're able to provide it and to go out and have meaningful experiences and work and connections and provide that bridge while you're even here to the next step of your lives in a holistic way. So it sounds like a tall order, but I think we focus a lot on your experience here, and we don't always focus on how does that translate into the next step. So I hope that we get to that point in a clearer way over the next 2 years. And I also hope that in the next 10 years, kind of expanding off of that we look at everything that we do as you're paying us something to be here. And we want to make sure that everything that you pay into, if you will, is an investment in your future, and that is just so clearly articulated to our students. That is valuable in the next 10 years. One of the things I've found even through this COVID crisis is there's a lot of universities where just things they're doing don't quite make sense with putting students first and caring for their needs first and being responsive. And we do that well. We care about people. And I think that will continue to mean something in the next 10 years. And also it will continue to mean something when we bring value to students' lives in a meaningful way that bridges the gap between, whether it's high school and their career paths, or whether it's switching to a new career and somebody, who comes to us a little older, a little, further in their career to be able to switch into something else. I think that value of bridging that gap is going to be huge, and especially the way we do it and the way that we care about students holistically.
Yeah. I used to play volleyball with a girl who always said, we got to get our money's worth tonight. And like if we easily won or we easily lost, we didn't get our money's worth. It's got to be a neck and neck race. So that's just what it reminds me of, is just the value proposition of Greenville, and students getting their money's worth.
Yeah.
So you touched a little bit on COVID and the impact it's had on higher education as a whole. Do you want to talk about just the reopening in the fall and what that will look like? I'm sure students are wondering, and I know prospective students too are just, what are different universities going to do? How are they going to respond? How's Greenville responding?
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer because it's like every day it seems things change a little bit on how we should respond safely. We have a unique environment being rural that I think plays into our strengths actually in this situation where people's lives have been very disrupted in the bigger cities. Here, up until just a couple weeks ago, we had literally a handful of even documented cases, and now we're only at like 12. So in the whole county. Yeah. So we have an advantage there to be able to keep students safe and the community safe. So we are planning to, as you know by now, that we do plan to come back in-person experience this fall. What that will look like might depend on what the rules and regulations are. Is it groups of 50 and we try to, do some things different, whether that means not having chapel in the same way, like still having it, but maybe in smaller groups, or having, an area for classes to be done, differently in larger classrooms or something like that. There might be some of those things, but we are committed to finding a path, and given whatever the situation brings for safety, trying to provide a safe environment, but also provide on our, as you said, value proposition. We do believe that we are called to serve students, and that the face-to-face experience is very important. So we are going to deliver on our mission for students and put that first as well.
That's exciting. I'm excited. I'm very interested to see how it's going to work, because personally, I don't want to have to wear a mask. That's all I'm concerned about. But I think it says a lot, just like, we're not, those decisions, making the decisions in this crisis time of our world, it's safety first too. And I think that's really, remembering that this is a rural community. So I'm excited to see how that all plays out. So
it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm as excited as you are, because it will, I know that constant change is here to stay. So that's an interesting dichotomy to have to live into.
So one last question. In your opinion, what's the best thing that Greenville has to offer?
Clearly it's people. I mean, you have to know that this place is unique because of the people that come together here. I know it's maybe overstated, but if you're part of the community and you engage with the people here, it's hard to not be impacted, really. And we have some cool spaces planned even for the students. Yet this summer we'll be talking some about it throughout the summer on social media. So we have some cool things going on, and places do matter. But more than the places, the physical property, I think it's the people that occupy those places.
I know it is overused, but it's never used enough at the same time, because it's true. Like, everyone's saying it. It must be true. So, Suzanne, thank you so much for being on this podcast. This was great, because I'm so used to being over Zoom, just looking at my computer. So actually being able to do a podcast face to face is really nice. So thank you for your time. And I'm excited to see how the next 2 years play out. So
thanks, Sydney. I appreciate it.
All right.